Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What if I told you that you might need a lot less to retire than what you've been led to believe? Most retirement planning advice tells us that we need about 80% of our pre-retirement income to comfortably fund our retirement. This is a popular general rule of thumb. But as with most broad statements, following the 80% rule of thumb could lead you off course when it comes to planning your own personal retirement. So how much do you actually need? If you're several decades away from retiring, maybe this general rule is a good place to start. But if your retirement is in sight, following this generalization might lead to you working longer or saving more than necessary. Because according to Morningstar's latest research, the actual replacement rate is likely to vary considerably by retiree household, from under 54% to over 87%. So let's look at the true costs of retirement and why your spending in retirement may very well fall well below this 80% mark, because understanding what goes into this figure can help you better plan your retirement. Let's go back to that 54 to 87% range. That's a massive range. To put it into context, let's say we have a household that's earning $100,000 a year in their pre-retirement years. We would be telling this household that they would need anywhere from $54,000 a year to $87,000 a year to fund their retirement years. Again, to further add context to this, if we were to apply something like a safe rate of withdrawal of, say, 4%, assuming this entire income comes from their investment portfolio, we would be telling this household that they would need an investment portfolio of anywhere from $1.35 million to nearly $2.2 million. There's just a huge range here, and this disparity really needs to be addressed. Most retirees do experience a drop in spending when they go into their retirement years. There's a couple really obvious drops that happen when you go from the workforce and enter into retirement. And first and foremost, and obviously speaking, is that you no longer need to save for retirement. You've made it to this point. But even looking at this point, there's a lot of variability at play as everyone saves a different percentage of their income. Some people are really aggressive savers and save a high percentage. Some people are not as aggressive and save a lower percentage. So let's throw a number into this just so we can put some context to this question. And we will say that this person here saves 15% of their income because that's the commonly recommended amount. So if we were to follow this often cited rule of thumb and say that an individual saves 15% of their income towards retirement, once they enter into retirement, we can assume that their income need drops by 15% because they no longer need to save for retirement. The next obvious one comes from FICA taxes. FICA taxes are payroll taxes used to fund Social Security and Medicare programs. For employees, the FICA tax rate is 7.65% of gross wages, broken down with 6.2% on earnings up to the annual wage-based limit, going towards Social Security tax, and 1.45% on all earnings with no income limit going towards Medicare tax. Employers match these contributions, bringing total FICA taxes up to 15.3%. So if we have a self-employed individual, they have an even bigger drop for income needs in retirement. It's also worth noting for higher income earners, their earnings beyond a certain limit would be subject to an additional Medicare tax of 0.9%. However, most people are not self-employed, and most people don't qualify as high-income earners. So when we're calculating this immediate drop in income needs, let's use that 7.65%. So that immediate drop right off the bat, if we're just looking at the contribution to investments and the drop in FICA taxes, most people are going to experience an income needs drop of around 23%, or more precisely, 22.65%. There is one other key factor to consider, and that is housing. And the fact of the matter is, 80% of all Americans age 60 and older are homeowners. And I love the idea of going into retirement with a completely paid off home. And the good news is, most Americans agree with this, as 2/3 of Americans go into retirement with a fully paid off home. So once you enter into retirement, if you no longer have a mortgage to pay on, there's a potential for a really big savings here. Now, owning a home doesn't mean you have no home ownership costs. Of course, there's repairs and maintenance and property taxes and insurance. But if you don't have a mortgage, your expenses are notably less. If we were to talk specifically about property taxes and insurance, these two line items alone generally account for 25 to 30% of a home's monthly cost. The median income for a two-income household in the U.S. as of 2024 is $140,400. If this household spent 30% of their budget on housing, including a mortgage, that'd be over $42,000 a year, or about $3,510 per month. On the high side, we can estimate that they are spending about 35% of that, or a little over $1,200 a month, on insurance and property taxes. So if they go into retirement with no mortgage payment, yes, they would still have property taxes and insurance. We could assume that their housing expenses might fall by a little bit over $27,000 a year. We could also take off that 15% savings rate, or a little over $21,000 a year, as well as 7.65% in FICA taxes, or almost $11,000 a year, meaning this household, upon entering into retirement, assuming a fully paid off home, might be looking at annual expenses of around $81,000, or annual expenses that are 57.92% of their pre-retirement income. Again, there's a very big difference between planning for a retirement where your income needs are 58% of your pre-retirement income versus 80% of your pre-retirement income. That could represent several additional years of working, saving, and investing. Of course, the very big assumption here that I'm looking at is having a fully paid off home. If someone enters into retirement without a fully paid off home, they're not going to experience as dramatic of a drop. Or say someone is a renter, their housing expenses will probably continue to make up a fairly significant portion of their budget. And there really are other factors at play. You have to consider maybe you no longer have to buy a professional wardrobe, or maybe you eat out less because maybe you eat out every single day for lunch if you're in an office or you're in a downtown area. There's a lot of factors that you have to consider, that expenses that might go up in retirement or expenses that might go down in retirement. But one of the biggest takeaways that I found from this Morningstar analysis is that many retirees may need approximately 20% less in savings than the common assumptions would indicate. And even throwing this 20% less than common assumptions into our example yields a fairly similar number to what we calculated. Now, unequivocally, I am not saying that everyone should be saving less for retirement. I am just trying to advocate that I think it's important that you figure out how much you are going to need to fund your retirement rather than relying on some broad general rule of thumb. Because if you follow just some general rule of thumb, that could lead you pretty far off base. Now, I think we can all agree that going into retirement with more in investments, having a buffer, is better than going into retirement with too little in investments or savings. That can create some huge problems. But the most important thing is that you have an accurate plan, because with an accurate plan, you can create a balance between how much you're working and how much you're saving, and just how much you get to enjoy with your money. All of the pillars matter. The other really important highlight from this research is that overwhelmingly, almost no retirees' spending follows a perfect uniform increase due to inflation. Meaning retirees don't need to simply withdraw a set amount every single year, simply adjust it up for inflation. Rather, what we actually find is that one of the primary drivers of spending in retirement comes down to, no surprise, financial status. Households with lower levels of consumption and higher funding ratios tend to have real increases in spending throughout retirement, while households with higher levels of consumption and lower funding ratios tend to see significant decreases. So households with more conservative consumption levels, meaning lesser spending, and higher funding ratios, meaning they have more in savings and investments, tend to increase their spending over time. What they find is they have an excess, so they're welcome to increase their spending. They get more freedom with their money. On the other hand, households with higher consumption levels, meaning higher spending rates, and lower funding ratios, meaning they have lesser in savings and investments, tend to experience spending declines over time. Because if you start out retirement near your spending threshold and that spending isn't sustainable, you're going to have to make cuts over time. So they naturally get a decrease in spending. It might be worth touching on that medical expenses in retirement become a big question mark, as medical expenses tend to disproportionately affect retirees, especially in their later years. And medical expenses have increased at a rate of about 5.5% on an annualized basis. And if we look at traditional inflation over time, it has outpaced average inflation rates by 50%. So that's not anything to scoff at. So it's very real to consider that medical expenses could become a significant burden for retirees, especially in their later years. How are you planning for your retirement income needs? Are you looking at an income replacement ratio? Are you using that generalized rule of thumb of 80%, or do you have a figure that's more personalized to your situation? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. It's retirement planning advice. I think my voice cracked like a teenage boy. To $87,000 a year in their 84% to 80%. It's a morning, let me tell you. I definitely needed coffee today. I'm so tired. You no longer need to save for retirement because you've made it to that point. So that was stupid. That was so stupid. Everyone saves more or less of their income. No, they don't. Everyone does not save. I wish they did, but they don't. Can't make that statement. Medicare and Social Security. I want to say Social Security first. Flip it and reverse it. Probably shouldn't reverse it, but we can flip it. Employer and participant. Whoa, frickin' A, why can't I talk today? I thought today was gonna be a good day. As 2/3 of all Americans. Again, there's a very big